Hi everyone. So we're going to jump right into chapter 3 today, talking about really understanding the sport consumer. Chapter 2 did a great job of providing kind of a big picture on how consumer research can drive effective marketing strategy. And this chapter really explores the literature on some of the how and the why questions in regards to sports consumers. Specifically, who are my consumers? Where do my consumers reside? Where do they work? How do they travel to and from the places where they consume the product? Where, when, and how have my consumers been exposed to the product? How and why do they become involved? And if they have been committed to my product, why? And if not, why have we lost some of that commitment? So, sports marketers truly must look beyond basic demographic research, just the who, the what, and the where, and to really able to understand reasons that either consumers are or aren't aware or involved in the commitment to their organization or product. And it really kind of boils down to three different things. So the three different things are environmental factors that are present, individual factors that are present, and also the decision making of the consumers. So those are kind of what the objectives for this chapter are based around. To recognize differences among socialization, involvement, and commitment for sports consumers, to understand the various individual and environmental factors that shape consumer involvement, and then also to understand the decision process for sport consumer. And your book does a really good job of laying that out. So, key questions, we've kind of already talked about these. Who are my consumers? Where do they reside? Where do they work? Have they been exposed to the product? Why were they exposed? Why are they committed to the project? Why are they not? So these are things that you all need to keep in mind, especially as you're working through your projects. So let's talk about socialization. Socialization is the process in which people assimilate and develop the skills, the knowledge, the attitudes, and any other equipment that would be necessary to perform various social roles. A lot of times, this is why parents will have their children attend a voluntary pre-kindergarten program at the ages of 3 and 4 years old. The reason that they're called voluntary is because obviously they're not mandatory. The state doesn't pay for the VPK3 program. It actually pays for the VPK4, and that's a whole other story. But the point is a lot of parents want their children to be ready to attend kindergarten for a full day of schooling. And they feel if they put their children at a very young age into the schooling behaviors by being in a classroom with a teacher, with different students, that they will be socialized and better equipped and prepared to be a good student when they enter into kindergarten. So that's kind of where socialization comes into play. In regards to sports, socialization demands some kind of involvement with sports or with a sports team, and it takes one of three basic forms: either behavioral involvement, cognitive, or affective involvement. So let's talk about the differences between those three. Behavioral involvement is the hands-on doing, like participating in the sport itself, or activities like going to Beef O'Brady's or going to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch the game with a bunch of your friends. Whether you're in the venue or whether you're simply, like I said, going to Beef O'Brady's to hang out with your friends. There's also cognitive involvement, and so this is the acquisition of information when you go out to actually find out what's happening with your teams. It might be actually watching the game, but it could also be checking up for updates on your phone. It could be watching the press release happen because they're getting ready to trade a certain player. It could be actually going out and talking with other fans about what happened in the game this weekend. So it's kind of, once again, it's going back to this idea that you're seeking information and knowledge about the sport. And then another type of socialization is the affective involvement. This is talking about the attitudes and feelings or emotions that a consumer has toward an activity. So maybe it's in regards to, sorry, let me get rid of that. Maybe it's in regards to attending some sort of pregame festivities or a pep rally or a tailgating event that seem to be kind of standard fare for effective involvement. Sometimes they can even be advertisements. If you guys have ever seen a sports ad that's really gotten you kind of emotional about, yeah, that's my team, or gosh, my team played great. Think about all those Disney commercials right after a team wins the Super Bowl. You just won the Super Bowl. What are you going to do next? I'm going to Disney World. They're capitalizing on this effective involvement. So you can kind of see the three different types of socializations involved in Table 3.1, which they did a 2012 study of NFL fans. And they really wanted to see what percentage of time was spent the most in certain activities. And as you can see very clearly here, most of the type of activity was actually watching the game through some sort of media. And then watching other NFL information, whether it be ESPN, Sports Center, things of that nature, and then actually talking about it, and then it goes off to smaller percentages in regards to listening, reading print, web, video games, and things of that nature. So this can kind of give you an idea of the different socialization that's present within sports. Talking about commitment in regards to understanding your sport consumer, it talks about the frequency, duration, and intensity, those words should sound familiar to you, of involvement in the sport, or their willingness to spend some sort of money or time or energy in a pattern of sports involvement. Typically, movement up that escalator that we talked about in the previous chapter indicates a deeper commitment to the sport. So what they've done is they've really tried to segment the population of their consumers. They want to understand who they are, why they're involved, what is their commitment level. So in order to do that, sports marketers have to continuously develop ways to nurture that consumer commitment, but also engage them in more research to understand what the involvement and what the commitment is. So the authors of this book have really wanted to understand what it means to be a committed consumer and to be an involved consumer. And they've examined a lot of the factors that can affect these two different things. So the factors are actually grouped into two categories: environmental factors and individual factors, and that's what we're going to jump into right now. After looking at figure 3.1, this is consumer behavior in sport. So to kind of kick off our discussion on environmental and internal factors related to understanding the sport consumer, your textbook includes figures 3.1, which is a really good graphic for those of you that need to see things in picture form, kind of showing the blend between environmental and individual influences on consumer decision making. So you might want to look this over, analyze it very carefully, and then after our discussion on the environmental and individual factors, come back to this picture and look at it again just to clarify concepts that you've covered. So let's go ahead and jump into environmental factors. We've got several listed on our slide here. Environmental factors talk about significant others, cultural norms and values, class, and also race and ethnicity. And I just want to speak very briefly about the four different things that you see here on this slide. There's also a couple on the next slide as well. In regards to significant others, whether it's family members, peers, your social group, maybe it's coaches, maybe it's your team that you're either attending this sports function with, or maybe you're all interested in this certain product. Family and friends can be the most powerful force in sports socialization, a lot of times because their influence kind of colors behaviors and attitudes that are present in the sport world. And there's some pretty shocking evidence listed in your book at the bullet points that you see in the middle of page 63. And I just want to mention those briefly. It said that 40% said that advice from friends had a strong influence on their buying behavior. 57% considered advice from a friend or a relative as a good reason to try a new grocery brand, and 60% said they seek advice from friends when considering products that they know little about. That's some pretty significant numbers for significant others. In regards to cultural norms and values, it's discussing broader frameworks, alternative cultures, subcultures, and even countercultures. All of these things really truly nurture different types of lifestyles. So when we talk about culture, think about a couple different things. Think about in cultures, specifically in the South, what is it okay and not okay to participate in on a Sunday? Back in the 1920s, all sporting activities were actually prohibited on Sundays, and this was to encourage family members to attend church. There are even laws in place right now, not just for the Southeast region. I know that Minnesota actually just passed a bill recently where you could now buy alcohol and liquor on Sundays, and that was banned before. So can you think about how if sports were still continued to be banned on a Sunday, what kind of implications would that have? Also, some aspects of culture are also based on climate and also topography or region. Who produces the best hockey players? Who produces the best surfers? Typically, your hockey players, I know you guys are thinking of Canada. Some of us might be thinking of Boston, Detroit, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota. And that's because also there are regional weather patterns that are present that allow for more playing time, more practice time. So that's something that's kind of connecting us back to those Erickson's 10,000 hours. If you live in a region that's more conducive to your sport, there's more availability to participate, giving you more minutes to be able to practice, therefore advancing you over the person that can only practice when it's sunny outside. In regards to class, sometimes class is a function of income and education or occupation. For others, it's a matter of inherited prestige and status that some derive from residence and lifestyle. Class is kind of one of those not so clear concepts. It can be very fluid at times. But is class going to affect who is able to purchase your product or who wants to buy your product? Race and ethnicity also is important in considering environmental factors. Environmental factors continue on to the next slide, talking about gender and sexuality, culture in the global marketplace, and market behavior of sports firms. And I want to touch very briefly on culture in the global marketplace in regards to what's acceptable. And a lot of times we have to understand that people who grew up in one culture have learned to see things in certain contexts that other people in other countries have learned to view in a completely different context. And as professional sports marketers, eventually, what we simply have to do is understand that there's a difference. We need to acknowledge the difference in between cultures and expectations and understandings. And if we can simply acknowledge that there are differences, we can move forward with a proper marketing plan. There's a lot more research that's actually needed on the behaviors of various cultures of sports fans, but there is an importance of recognizing and making sure that we're negotiating differences. The final environmental factor that we're going to discuss today has to do with market behavior of sports firms. And this is kind of a movement that we've probably seen very recently where think of some big name teams that have kind of made this movement to become very socially aware and very socially responsible in the industry. So we have the NFL that's doing the Play 60, and this is where they have their players go out to elementary schools and really talk to the kids and get them up and physically active and moving. They invite them out to camps where they can show them how, to run, jump, hop, and skip, things of that nature. Locally, we also have the Orlando Magic Youth Foundation, and even in baseball, the Major League Baseball has kind of revived baseball's inner city programs. So these are all things that are kind of referred to as corporate social responsibility, and it's really grown in importance over the last few decades, because research indicates that increased awareness of a firm's corporate social responsibility actually improves consumer attitudes and also inclinations to purchase products. So the sport properties have really elevated the CSR in their hierarchies of objectives in relation to their core vision and core ideology. Next, we're moving on to discussing individual factors in understanding the sport consumer. We're going to discuss self-concept, stage in the life or family cycle, learning, perception, and motivation and emotion in regards to those types of factors. Individual factors really influence the way that a consumer interacts and makes sense of the larger the world. So when we're talking specifically about self-concept, I want you to think about the first time as a child you were involved in sport and how that was important to you and to your lives. Did it shape who you are today? Did what you learned through a specific coach or teammate or maybe even a parent volunteer, does something still stick with you today? I think all of us probably has something back from our childhood or growing up that really kind of influences us. So our being is a fusion of individual and environmental, personal, social, and internal and external things that take place. Few associations inform an individual self-concept to the extent found in sports. Let's talk about also stage in the life or family cycle. Very similar, easy concept to consider. When we're considering a product, when we're considering being involved with a certain team or an organization, a lot of people have to consider their family first. So if I have children, of course, I'm going to be very excited about any type of product or team that has built some sort of program or function to include my children. Why? Because that makes it easier for me to participate. So your book lists some different stages that could happen, in life, or that sometimes usually happens, going through adolescence or teen years, college years, single and but independent without children, and then finally living with a partner, maybe even getting married without children, and then having children, or being single with children, an empty nester, retired. These all are different stages in life or in the family cycle. And transitions from one stage to another may have a profound effect on our sport involvement and commitment. So it really is in the best interest of the sport marketer to understand the dynamics of their clientele. The next one that I want to discuss is in regards to learning. The formal definition of learning is the acquisition of new responses to behavioral cues in the environment occurring as a result of enforcement. And there's a couple different ways that sports marketers really understand how their consumers learn. They talk about learning, feeling, and then doing, and then they kind of mix it up later in the book and talk about feeling, doing, and learning. And then again, they kind of end it with another mix up, doing, feeling, and learning. So what do all those things mean? The basic learning hierarchy suggests that consumers first process information about a product, which involves cognitive involvement, often through advertising. If additional messages succeed, consumers next develop a new feeling about the product, and this is considered affective involvement. And this may lead them to actually buy the product. So when I talk about learn, feel, and do, this is kind of explaining the progression that the sports consumer would go through in order to be involved or finally buy a certain product. Knowledge really links to involvement and commitment, and truly in an endless loop. So that's why your authors of your textbook switch that cycle around, but maintain the same components: learn, feel, and do. They give examples. If we switch it up to feel, do, and learn, and feeling really gets the emotions involved. So sports marketers really target the emotional side of someone to get them to be involved in something. And then after they really feel something and they get involved, maybe they have an emotional response to an advertisement that gets them to buy a certain product. And after they buy that certain product, then they decide they're really into it, they want to learn more about it, and then the cycle continues. If we have a situation where the do component comes first, that's probably an opportunity where someone participated in something, maybe their friend or their significant other got them involved. They did something and then they had an emotional response associated with that and decided, listen, I love this. I want to learn more. So the U.S. Army kind of took advantage of this type of concept, and a way of recruiting individuals was to give them an experience where they had simulated gunfights or simulated helicopter rides. So they gave them an opportunity to actually participate or be involved, and hopefully the goal was to have an emotional response to that activity in the hopes that they would want to learn more about what it would mean to be a part of the Army or to become a helicopter pilot. So learning is very, very key in assisting the consumer to invest in a product. In regards to perception, learning requires the consumer to actually use perception, which is typically defined as the process of scanning, gathering, assessing, and interpreting information in the environment. There's actually a lot of work that needs to be done on how consumers use the senses in perception and decision making, because a lot of perception, ladies and gentlemen, is opinion based. So perception really depends on the characteristics of the person, the situation, or the thing that's actually perceived. To one individual, the roaring of the crowd might be very exhilarating, and to another individual, it might be very intimidating. So Like many product and service providers, sports teams have often attempted to develop certain perceptions among fans in order to produce or to really kind of market their product. One way that they've been successful in kind of pushing their product is the idea of scarcity. Just recently, there was a very large soccer match that was announced down in Miami, El Clasico, for any of you soccer followers out there. It was with Real Madrid, or will be with Real Madrid and Barcelona, some of the best two teams in the world that were coming to Miami to play. And one of the things that they did was, in their marketing strategy, was to say, look, you got to be a part of this pre-sale. Tickets are going to sell out really fast because of this international type of match. And it worked within 10 minutes, I believe, of ticket sales for a pre-sale event, not even open to the general public. Pre-sale event sold right around 40,000 tickets in a 63-seat stadium down in Miami. So marketing researchers have really demonstrated previously that scarcity factor does work in perception and getting individuals motivated to either buy or become part of a team. Other issues in regards to perception that sports marketers should be relatively perceptive to have to do with facility cleanliness. If you're opening a brand new stadium, I'm sure people have very high expectations about, it's going to be a safe environment. There are going to be clean bathrooms. Is my money for my tickets going to be worth my time and effort? Things of those nature. Next up is motivation. And I have to apologize, guys. I've been so into my lecture that I haven't been clicking through your PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click through and get us kind of up to speed with the PowerPoints. But I would also encourage you to access the PowerPoint file itself on Blackboard so that you can pay attention to these slides. I apologize. Here we are. Okay, motivation. So let's talk about motivation and how that helps us understand the sport consumer. When we talk about achievement and self-esteem, there's a bunch of different factors that help sports marketers identify individual triggers for sport involvement. But there's some motivational factors that have been merged as very, very clear. So when we talk about achievement and self-esteem, the notion of winning does matter for playing and fans. And one of the USTA surveys, the U.S. Tennis Association, serious players listed winning as a major reason for playing. I know that when I was back in high school, I was on a very winning high school soccer team. We went to the state championships all 4 years. And so that was a huge feather in my cap. And of course, I enjoyed that, being part of a successful team. I enjoyed that little bit of popularity back in my high school days because I was associated with a very successful team. Craft is also another point in motivation, and this kind of steers us away from the idea that winning is everything. Winning isn't everything that counts for certain individuals. For many people, simply the enjoyment of participation in learning a new skill prompts sport interest. Health and fitness, obviously a lot of people are motivated by simply being healthy and understanding that participating in an event or in a team event or attending a certain event or buying a certain product will help maintain their health and fitness. Fun and festival. Humans have a long history of framing their games with circles of spectators and fun lovers who exchange money for sights and food and merchandise and all of those fun things. So if it's a social event like maybe tailgating before an Orlando City match and then actually getting to go in and enjoy the game, that can be simply motivating in itself. Another big motivator is the eros. This is kind of creating that sexual interest that everybody talks about, with very attractive players. Cristiano Ronaldo, Peyton Manning, maybe Alex Morgan from the women's national team, creating this idea that we've got many sweaty players, that are participating, and sometimes sports marketers will even come up with clever lines like your book talks about how in 1975 the Golden State Warriors ran a promotional line and it said, "We've got 5 men in shorts who can go all night." Believe it or not, and I know that you guys have seen this before, but sex in sports absolutely sells. Is it appropriate? For some, not for all. But your book talks about the fact that it requires more research because of the fact that we do use sex to sell certain products in sports. Moving on, affiliation, being a part of something, feeling like you are connected and that you belong and that you are important, is another motivating factor for sports consumers. Another possible motivation factor is the eustress and the risk in gambling. So this is kind of like that having that emotional high or that ride of participating is can be very similar to something like gambling. It's kind of an addictive combination of euphoria and stress, and it really is no wonder that sport and gambling have kind of gone hand in hand for almost as sport has been as long as sport has been around. And then the final bullet that your textbook talks about is entertainment and escape. And a lot of fans believe that a day at the ballpark or an evening in front of their TV kind of takes their minds off of their everyday troubles. For maybe that mom and dad that have been hard at work all week, they have, their children's practices that they have to take care of. Maybe they're getting into theater practices or choir practices. It's a way to get a babysitter and just kind of escape real life for a little bit. So researchers are really beginning to kind of tease out not only the differences of what motivates, but they're also looking specifically at segmenting what motivates men versus what motivates women. And a better understanding of fan motives promises to help marketers develop better communications with their consumer base through utilizing promotions, ads, or some type of newsletter. Before we move on to discussing emotions and decision making, which is kind of the final component of the chapter, if you look in your textbook, page 76, figure 3.2, this is the model of consumer behavior. So again, if you're someone that appreciates graphics, you can kind of see at the very top of the page at the right, it talks about the marketing behavior of sports firms and what they do, and then they analyze the responses, whether it's through the cognitive or emotional systems, with our individual and environmental characteristics, and then you're able to measure some sort of behavior that is outcomes of those plans and responses. So take a moment to look over that in your book. If you need more time, if you have questions, please sure to ask. I'm definitely going to keep moving on to finally discuss the decision-making process in regards to our sports consumers. The final component of chapter, what are we on, 3? I totally forgot. The final component of this chapter is looking at the decision-making processes involved with the sport consumer. And there are a lot of factors discussed in this chapter that contribute to the difficulty of truly establishing a standard process by which consumers make decisions about becoming or even staying involved with sport products. So you've got a picture of a model at the bottom of the page, figure 3.3. It can be a very helpful tool for marketers, but we have to understand that a consumer's decision to become involved in a sport includes several stages, and it may not always include all of these stages either. But the first one is a need for recognition, and this is kind of the idea that all humans are kind of aroused by this need or a motive to belong. And in sports, a lot of that is identifying with the local team for wherever it is that you live. So team identification is one of the most important factors in determining attendance for a venue or a sport. So in understanding that, team identification might really be seen as the starting point and also the ending place for each cycle of the fan decision-making process. The second one is talking about awareness or information search. So a consumer may really seek information about products that can satisfy this aroused need to belong or that motive to belong. And the importance of information about distance to the venue, time to travel, the cleanliness of a value can be one of the first things that individuals look for in the decision-making process. So sports marketers really want to understand what do consumers want and do they know about the products? Because a huge pitfall for marketers is the fact that these consumers are completely unaware of the product involved. So this is kind of where social media has really stepped in and done a huge favor for marketers to be able to put the word out in order to satisfy that need to be a part of something or for that team identification. The next decision-making process component talks about evaluation of choices. And so what I'm going to do now is I'll come back to purchase decision and experience because the next couple slides go into evaluation of choices a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to pass this too for right now, because this is in regards to step 3. So consumers make product choices at a number of levels. And so we have a gentleman, Philip Kotler, who distinguish, sorry, these certain levels. And this is in regards to product family and product class. In regards to product family, when we're talking about leisure, people make choices between broad families such as competitive sports, outdoor recreation, and hobbies. So this is something that's not just involved with picking a sports team. It's what am I going to do to spend my time and have it be enjoyable. Some individuals choose to be season ticket holders. Other individuals decide that they're going to go hunting for a week. And other individuals simply want to enjoy their hobbies like hitting the beach and going surfing. Product class is in relation to the many classes of sports that are possible out there. So motorsports, water sports, field sports, team sports. Product line is talking about within the team sport class, there are lines of products like a bat and ball sports or ball only sports and stick and ball sports. So if you're, let me go back to the previous slide. So if you're kind of thinking about this from top down, starting with product family, this is kind of very large, broad-based concept that we're beginning to filter down. If you guys were seeing me in my office right now recording this, my arms are waving. I'm trying to kind of picture this big umbrella for product family. Broad choices here, and then if we start talking about the realm of classes, we're narrowing that down to just sports. And now what we're doing is within those sports, we're talking about different sports that use like baseball, and then ball only sports like basketball, and then stick and ball sports like maybe lacrosse. So we're starting to really differentiate between the different sports. And then when we're talking about product type, we're talking within the ball only line. We've got specific product types such as rugby, world football, which is considered soccer, and then American football. And then ultimately the brand within those various choices. So for American football, we've got the NFL brand, the NCAA brand. So your book gives the examples of the Packers and the SEC brand. So those kind of demonstrate the evaluation of choices that consumers make. So I'm going to back up now because we skipped a couple slides in regards to decision making process. So let's go on and talk about purchasing decisions. In regards to deciding what to purchase, we want to know to what extent are decisions planned and purposeful and with meaning, versus to what extent are decisions just simply spontaneous or even made even a couple days before the event. We want to understand what makes the consumer decide to plan something versus be more of an impulsive buy to decide to participate in the event. So we want to understand that because the habits of the individuals that plan ahead can be very different from the individual that decided to splurge last minute and attend an event. Also, the final decision-making process component is in regards to the sport experience. This stage may include a period of anticipation after a person has actually made the decision to attend an event, whether it's to purchase a ticket, whether it's to buy that big product that they've been thinking about for a while. And then there's a period of preparation where they're getting ready for this event, they're traveling, they're getting to their hotel, and then the actual main experience, and then actually travel from the main experience. So we want to understand all those different components in related to those types of decisions. So what I'm going to do now then is fast forward a little bit. Oh, just to the next slide, not too much. Because the last two components that we want to talk about is the actual evaluation of the experience and the post-evaluation behavior. So in other words, was their experience something that was enjoyable to them? How do consumers truly evaluate what their experience was like? How do we look at satisfaction? Your book talks about a formula. It's the benefits minus the actual cost, and that's where satisfaction kind of comes into play. So they can also develop positive or negative attitudes for a host of reasons. And then finally, looking at post-evaluation behavior. After evaluating, the consumer has three basic choices. If they're satisfied, they're probably going to decide to repeat the experience in hopes to really kind of build a truly stronger identity with the activity. If they're not satisfied, they're probably going to abandon the activity and not participate again. and this would kind of signify that falling off the escalator. And then if they're kind of in the middle between being satisfied or dissatisfied, they might reevaluate again and have different decisions about product choices at various levels. So we want to try to avoid as sports marketers the dissatisfaction and the marginal satisfaction. The goal is to have that satisfaction, to see the repetition of behavior in order to keep them moving up that escalator. When we do understand that there's a dissatisfaction or even a marginal satisfaction with the product or with a sport involvement, we have to really look at the data that's out there. So this is a little bit different than the research that we're discussing in class in regards to peer-reviewed research. Sports marketers do have many sources of market research data, and they have to make sure that they sort through each of those studies and to truly be careful to interpret those elements of research. So you want to be very careful as a marketer when you're doing your research, understand definitions, look at the methodologies, and also the sampling that was involved. And this is probably the way that it is similar to the research that we've talked about in class in regards to looking at the sample size. Is it generalizable to a large portion of the population? Is it comparable? Methodologies. What was the methods for collecting the data? How was the survey distributed? Who was it distributed to? So in kind of connecting this type of class back to some of our more true exercise science classes, this is a great way to kind of form that bridge, is that research is very, very crucial to the sports marketer in regards to understanding who your consumer is. So we've reached to the end of the lecture. Next one we will talk about Chapter 4, and that will be understanding how to actually perform and give us some insight into the market research in the sport industry.